she has been on the forefront of working with music industry organizations for many, many years on, this is not a new topic. It is just being highlighted again now. It's been highlighted several times in history, but it's back to the forefront as it should be. And she's been there along the entire road, and we just couldn't think of somebody better to have come speak with us tonight. So I first just want to give you guys a little more background on Dyana. I think one of the most interesting things just from her as her professional background is she's a celebrity strategist. But one of the most interesting quotes that I've read about her is this statement that it's not just media coaching, it's human concern. And by that is that it is amazing to see the repertoire of artists that have mentioned what an impact she has been in a part of their lives and getting them and growing them in their careers. And I mean, she's worked with every generation of artists. I mean, looking at the list is just incredible, but you can see how important she has been in our industry. She's been featured in the New York Times, CNN, PBS, MTV. That's just scratching the surface of where her name shows up. She is a co-executive. She co-executive produced the Unsung episode that won a NAACP Image Award. She co-produced the Marian Anderson Awards at Philadelphia's Kimmel Center for Performing Arts. Serves on several boards, such as the National Museum of African American Music and the Philadelphia chapter of the Recording Academy. I also, big accolade is she helped establish June as being Black Music Month, and she has been recognized by former President Clinton and George W. Bush for her music activism. With that, I would love to, Justin, have Dyana join me.
I'm here.
Hello.
Hey. Hi, Nathan.
So,
hi, everybody.
So Dyana, we had a great conversation, what was that, last week, about just getting to know you more, and just, I think I would just love for you to kind of start and maybe elaborate on a little bit of what I've talked about and what role you have played in our industry. Your energy, and just, I'm so excited for everybody to hear from you tonight. You're just a ray of light. So I'll let you kind of start with that, and then we'll dive deeper.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you, Nathan, and the entire board. A special shout out to Justin as well for reaching out to me some time ago. It is a distinct honor to be with you this evening for a myriad of reasons. One, your executive committee are incredibly impressive. I wish when I was first entering into the music business, I had a group like Solid to be a part of, because you are informative, inspiring, and you are obviously leaders now, and you represent the future of our industry as well. So I have chill bumps as I say that, because clearly the group that are members are about it. And I love young people like you who are interested not just in this moment and the present, which is obviously very important, but in the future. And so I feel good knowing that there are young people like you in the industry. I can depart and go to heaven. That's where I'm going. And know that there are good people like you in charge.
Well, we appreciate you paving the road for us to even get here, because I know that what you have even talked to me and about, and what you've had to overcome, and your whole process to get here has really set the pace for us to even be here. And we understand that it's our duty to take it to that next level, because you put in all the hard work, and we have to make sure that we bring it home.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Nathan. All right. So, good evening, fam. Again, as Nathan said, I'm Dyana Williams. I'm CEO of Influence Entertainment. We are a media company that specializes primarily in doing celebrity development and creating strategies with their managers and their publicists and their teams to help them be more effective communicators and to sort out their public persona. Believe it or not, there are some artists who just don't have a clue. They're very talented, but that's where my company and my team and I come into play to assist them. I've had the distinct pleasure of working with artists in all genres, from Justin Bieber, I worked with him on his first album. Rihanna, worked with her as well on her first album. One of my favorite country groups, the Zac Brown Band, worked with Zac very early on. In fact, I was with him at the Grammys the year that they won Best New Artist, and I prepped Zac and the band just for that, because Zac was really not interested in red carpet, hoopla. He wasn't interested in all of that. But we had a breakfast and he was like, oh, so the record company sent you out here to change my mind? I was like, actually, no, the record company sent me out here to help you in the band if you wanted preparation for the Grammys. But if you don't, hey, I will get on a plane and go right back to Philly. And that's when Zac said, Dyana, come with me, took me upstairs to the penthouse where the rest of the band was. And indeed, a pleasure. Josh Abbott, I mean, just tons of artists I've had the pleasure of working with. Mary, gospel music, even a heavy metal band. The principles of great communication are the same regardless to genre. However, the majority of my clients these days appear to be in the #1 genre in the world, which is hip hop. So I've worked with everyone from T.I., who was my client for 8 years during his tenure at Atlantic Records, to A$AP Rocky from Harlem, which is where I grew up, to all the great divas, Little Kim, Remy Ma, Trina. You know, I've had a pleasure of working with a myriad of artists. But I wanted to speak with you today about our individual consciousness and responsibility. 8 minutes and 46 seconds, many of us around the world, not just in the United States, witnessed a murder. The murder of George Floyd, who, while he was dying before our very eyes, this was not a TV show, it was not a fictional movie, it was a factual, actual murder of a man who did nothing and begged in those last moments of his life. He told these police officers that he could not breathe, and they callously kept their knee on his neck and on his back, handcuffed, and they killed an innocent Black man. It wasn't the first time. We've seen many Black men and women shot in the back, shot while running through their neighborhood, shot by just standing on the sidewalk. We have witnessed in America for its entire history, brutality. This one was a little different because we saw it and he called out for his dead mother. Not his living mother, but his dead mother. He cried out for his mother, a grown man. But Black folks in America have been victims for a long time. It is not a new thing. We were brought over here, victims, unwilling victims, in the transatlantic trip from the shores of Africa to the United States. And what a lot of people seem to forget and overlook is that much of America was built by free labor, by Black folks who didn't even have the right to read or write. I'm gonna need everybody to understand that now. That seems really what? But the reality is, for the longest time, it was against the law for a Black person to know how to read. Now, this cruelty that has gone on consistently for as long as I've been alive, and as I said, since Black folks were brought over here since 1619. I firmly believe that there is a new consciousness going on in America among the conscious, among those who recognize that we have a problem and it's an uncomfortable thing to discuss. It's hard to listen to someone suggest that I might be racist, that I might have a bias against people of color or even against white people. America and the rest of the world is a bastion of racism. It's not just here in America. I went to South Africa some years ago, and when I tell you that they have reinvented, they've done a remix on apartheid, and it ended some 20-something years ago. And then Nelson Mandela was released from prison, where he had been for decades, because he was such a threat to the governing, ruling white class. And then when he came out, ran for president and became the president of that country. But I can tell you that he made a lot of concessions to allay the concerns of white people who thought that they were going to be Afrikaners, who were going to be murdered by the very people that they had victimized for so long. So racism is not unique to America. It exists all through Europe, all through Asia, all through South America, all through North America, the Caribbean, New Zealand, Australia, the polar caps, name a place where there are human beings. And unfortunately, there are people with biases and prejudices against people. Now, today I'm addressing specifically Black and brown people. I'm an Afro-Latina who grew up in the Bronx and Harlem. So all my life, I've known what it is to walk in a store and to be followed. I know what it's like to go into a high-end store and be followed and questioned about, can I help you? And it's not, can I help show you something? It's, I got my eye on you. Can I help you? Like, you don't belong here. That has happened to me way too many times. I have stood in line to board a flight to sit in my first class seat, and I have been questioned about, oh no, this is the first class line. Okay, and yes, my ticket says first class. And then when I have taken my seat in first class, next to oftentimes a white person, more often than not, I am asked, well, what do you do? And the subtext to that question, ladies and gentlemen, is, what did you do to get here in first class? And I could go on and on and on and tell you about the daily assaults that I have faced as an Afro-Rican woman on planet Earth who has traveled extensively. I am well-read, I am very educated. My mother was a college professor, so education was stressed. And diversity and cultural diversity was stressed in my home as well. My mother, Puerto Rican, my father, Black, grew up in the South. However, when my parents divorced, maybe 2 years later, my mother married a Jewish man. So then I became more aware and inculcated into his culture and learning more about how he grew up and his value systems. It is time for us, all of us, to examine our biases, to examine our attitudes. What have you said when you're alone with your friends? Have you used the N-word? Have you allowed other people in your presence to use it? What have you allowed relatives and friends to get away with? And if you've participated in that conversation without calling them out on their racism, you're smart. So now in America and in our world, and on our beautiful planet, it is time for us to scrutinize our values, our attitudes. And none of us who have eyes, a pulse, a heart, synapses, should be able to hear about examples of racism and biases and be comfortable within ourselves. In fact, I thought to myself the other day, everybody who is born, they should do a DNA test on everybody who is born, because then we'll have a better understanding, a better overstanding of who we are and where we come from. And I believe that we would realize how much more we have in common. The reality is that we are all human beings. However, there are distinctions, obviously, and that's part of what we're talking about today. I will tell you this much: when I did my DNA, a fact that I kind of knew already, because in my family, I had an aunt who was, Nathan, your color, blonde, blue eyes. My Aunt Minnie, one of my favorite aunts. Her daddy was Black. Her mama, my grandmother, was mixed. And when I did my DNA, and I've also done my genealogy, I am almost half and half. Half white, half African. Almost half and half. And obviously, I know that the white part of me wasn't necessarily, again, because I've done my genealogy and traced my family back to New Hampshire and Rhode Island.
Wow.
My Black great, 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 all the way back to the 1700s, grandmothers, my grandmothers, I don't think that they willingly entered into relationships with the white men for whom they had children. So I would venture to say also, my assumption, my safe assumption, is that my grandmothers were victims of rape. We know from studying enslavement that Black women didn't have a choice. They didn't have a choice. And Black men. Black women were not the only ones raped. Black men were raped as well. So we have a history in our country of violence, sexual violence, physical violence, all kind of violence against people of color. And some white people today wonder, how come there's an uprising in the streets? Why are people chanting Black Lives Matter? Why is this going on? Well, Nathan, as you mentioned earlier, I am almost 70, and I have been on this planet a few decades. And I will tell you that in the 60s, I marched against the Vietnam War. In the 70s, I marched because of the civil rights movement as well. Late 60s, early 70s, I marched, I protested, did it again in the 80s, did it again in the 90s. My approach is different now in the 2000s. I write checks to organizations that I support the work that they're doing. I'm way too good and grown to be, me personally, to do what I did when I was a teenager in my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Now, as I said, as I look at 70 and also in the coronavirus environment, I am doing different kind of work. So I am saying to you, leaders of now, and individuals who will determine the diversity, what it looks like. Many of you will be in positions to hire. Many of you will be in positions to, on a board such as Solid, create a diverse environment where you look around and you see not just people who look like you, but people who are in our greater society. That's what I want. I don't want to walk in a room and be on a board that's just all Black people. Nathan, you mentioned that I am the past president of the Grammy chapter here in Philadelphia, and I'm still a governor on the board. And I will tell you that every time I walk into our board meetings, and now, of course, much like we're doing here, Zoom, I see white men, I see white women, I see Asian people, I see Latinos, I see Black men and Black women. I see diversity. And I will tell you that not just myself, but former presidents worked diligently so that we would have a board that reflected our community in Philadelphia. It's not all Black here in Philly, and it's not all white, even though white is the more dominant population. We work very hard, and we are very proud in Philadelphia, our Grammy chapter. Now, I will tell you something that I haven't discussed with anyone. I had a call the other day with the chair of the board that I sit on at Temple University. And I told him that of my intention to resign. And part of my resignation is my protest. And I told him that I could not stand walking into another board meeting. I've been on the board at my school at Temple University, my alma mater, for 5 going on 6 years. And I told him that I just couldn't walk into a room or be on another Zoom with a bunch of all white men. I am the only Black Latina woman on the board. Unconscionable in 2020, unconscionable at a school like Temple University that has a very mixed population. You walk on campus, you're gonna see everybody. You're not gonna see just all white men. So we have a responsibility, those of us that really care, and you're leaders. And I am challenging you today to examine your own values, which I'm doing even now, because I will tell you that I have said things that I now regret. I understood why I said them in anger. I've said things about white people, and mind you, I'm white too. But I have said things to those white people who treated me poorly. And the other day when I spoke up to my board chair, I told him that the resignation is a result of, and I raised the issue of lack of diversity a year and a half. And he said to me, oh, but we have so-and-so, and he's a Black man. And that was supposed to make me feel better. That was supposed to make me feel better. And he begged me not to resign. He said, give me a chance to fix what is wrong. And this is somebody who is a Pulitzer Prize editor. He was before he became the dean of my school, and has a son-in-law who is a Black man. So this is not a person who's oblivious. This is a very conscious, knowledgeable, experienced individual. What is happening now in America is that we are now examining, those of us who care to, we are examining our biases, and it is time for us to course correct some of our negative attitudes about each other. I cut Nathan, he's gonna bleed. You cut me, I'm gonna bleed. It doesn't matter. But we're at a crossroads in America where we need to understand that Black folks and brown folks, and how about the Native indigenous people? How many Native, I don't like to say Native Americans, how many Native indigenous people do you personally know? Nathan, do you know? Okay, okay. And all of us together, how many indigenous people do you know? Do you realize now that COVID is striking people of color more than any other population, because typically we are underserved in health services, we eat the worst food, we have food deserts in most Black communities. You cannot find a decent supermarket with food that is whole food. And I'm not talking about the Whole Food supermarket. I'm talking about nutritious whole foods. Our diets are laden with sugar. And oftentimes we don't know better because it's there. It's what our parents and their parents ate. You know, chitterlings, which is, I say chitterlings, I don't particularly care for them, but it was a delicacy for some Black folks. But guess what? White folks ate the better part of the pig, and what was left, Black folks fixed it and made it a food item because we were given the scraps. Enslaved people had to eat whatever they could eat. Even after the liberation of Black folks, the Emancipation Proclamation bullshit, it took Texas, some places in Texas, 2 years after the emancipation, hence Juneteenth, which the person who currently resides at 1600 Black Lives Matter Boulevard is taking credit for putting Juneteenth on the map. No, sir. Black folks, we've been celebrating this for a long time. We're very aware of what Juneteenth means to a group of people who were last to find out that they had been liberated. And trust and believe, the white folks that owned another human being, owned families, they knew, but they kept them working. And even after emancipation, a new remix on racism came into play in our country called sharecropping. And go through the decades, redlining, negative bank practices where Black folks couldn't get loans. I saw a movie the other day about a gentleman who was very smart and wanted to buy real estate, but he enlisted a white man to do all of the whatever. And then when the deal was done, money was exchanged, he popped up, and this was to move into a white neighborhood. They were having a hissy fit and nervous breakdown because a Black family was moving into their community. What kind of shit is that?
Right, right.
So we are at a crossroads. And as I said, Nathan, I've been through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and I have experienced direct racism on an ongoing basis. And I don't think it's going away anytime soon. But what I am relying on, especially after our conversation with Amanda and Justin, we spoke last week, I am relying on you, Nathan, Amanda, Justin, your executive committee, and all of the members of Solid to examine what little and big things can you do to make a change in our communities. We're on this planet together. I go down, you should be viewing it like you go down. If somebody is cruel and disrespectful to me and treats me a certain kind of way just because of the color of my skin, you should be incensed and you should speak up on it. A very prominent music executive told me recently, who runs a label, that he is examining his white privilege like never before. And I know this, the concept of white privilege, white solidarity, biases, all of these terms that we're hearing and seeing on social media, television, discussions such as this. He told me that his 23-year-old daughter, who he mentioned that she was gay, he obviously accepted his daughter, told him, "Daddy," I shared this story with you last week, Nathan, yes, "What are you doing as a white privileged man in power? What are you doing to help even out the playing field and to correct the mistakes of the past?" He told me that he had no people of color in his executive team. And I said, now see, this is part of the problem. So these are the things that we need to fix. There's so many things. I doubt very seriously that in my lifetime, I will see what it needs to happen amongst humanity. But I'm in charging you, members of Solid, to examine your thoughts, your feelings, your relationships. You know, another thing that happened immediately after George Floyd's murder is I got a series of calls, text messages, and emails asking me, was I okay? From my white people. Mm-hmm. Now, my question was, how come you didn't ask me this question last week or last month or last year? All of a sudden, and trust, believe, it was something else, because it happened back to back to back, where I started hearing from my white colleagues and white folks that I communicate with and socialize with, asking me, was I okay? And my answer then, my answer still, is I am not okay, and nor should you be either. So it is time. I'd like to, Nathan, bring you into this conversation a little bit more, because I'm very passionate about us affecting change. My 5-year-old grandson is mixed like me. He's a beautiful little boy. He's smart as something else. He comes over here, takes the remote control of my computer and says, "Nana." He goes to Netflix, to his, the kids section.
Amazing.
He is Greek. His mother is Greek and Italian. And of course, his father is Puerto Rican and Black. And as we already determined, we got white blood in us from way, way back.
Right, right.
So I have a little United Nations grandson. And it is my prayer that as a light skin, because this is another thing, even amongst Black folks, we have this whole thing about light skin, dark skin, good hair, bad hair. It's a mess. But again, it is part of racism. And all these isms, sexism, ageism, racism, people of the world, if COVID isn't teaching us anything, we need to learn that we are all human beings. We are all subjected to this virus, whether you are white, purple, black, orange, whatever. But as I said, it's hitting communities of color harder because of underlying health issues, not having necessarily the best health care, so many things. But I am imploring all of you today to help make a difference in your own circle, in the larger community. Make a difference. Like Michael Jackson said, let's make this a better place for all of us because we're sharing this planet together. So with that, Nathan.
Well, that was extremely impactful. So I want to keep going on specifically here because as I talked about kind of the makeup of our organization, you know, we are all going to be future leaders, and it's something, you know, we're talking now, right, about how we can make change from perspective of where we are at leaders. But what would be an advice that you would give a bunch of, you know, the level of where we're at in our career, to have those conversations with our bosses, or to have those conversations of where you feel like you might not have a seat at that table yet, but obviously we've got the number and it is our responsibility to speak up, as you've kind of said earlier. It doesn't matter if they're, you know, up here, but what kind of, I guess, maybe advice as we kind of move towards this would you give us?
Well, I know that many companies, entertainment companies, because I have spoken to several labels during June Black Music Month, are now scrutinizing their hiring practices, and they're looking around saying, we don't have any people of color up in this mix. And I know that you guys, ladies and gentlemen, are in my beloved Nashville, where, as you mentioned earlier, Nathan, I am proud to sit on the board of the National Museum of African American Music, opening up this fall, prayerfully COVID, on 5th and Broadway. I'm inviting you all, come support us, support the culture, because Black music, while it's created primarily by Black people and influences others and other genres, it is America's indigenous music. And not only is it our indigenous music, it is one of our greatest exports around the world. Right now, hip hop, I mentioned that, the #1 genre, not in America, but around the planet, is hip hop music made primarily by Black folks. So we should be proud that it's our indigenous music. And even Nashville, that's called Music City, and that music was mostly country, okay? If you are in Nashville and you do not know about the great legacy of gospel music, and R&B and blues in Nashville, then here's another thing I'm inviting you to consider, that you live in an environment that's rich, not just in country music, and a lot of country music informed by gospel and the blues as created by Black people. I'm not interested in offending anybody. I'm stating factual, actual. That's just a fact, okay? So we are opening this fall in Nashville on 5th and Broadway. Come celebrate your, my culture, because it is ours. So part of what I would say in response to your question, Nathan, is do not be afraid to speak up. Be fearless. When you see racism, when you are aware that you are in an environment that doesn't look like the community at large, speak on it, do something about it. Just like right now, solid. And you're talking about future leaders. Nathan, all of you are leaders now. I have listened, I've sat in on your meetings, I've heard how you communicate with each other. You're leaders now, and y'all are very bossed up. So I can only imagine what the next few years is gonna be like for the majority of you. I ventured to say that y'all will be running shit. And what I'm saying to you, the mandate that I'm sharing with you, that I am asking you to consider, is greater diversity. So it doesn't just look one way. Let us consider engaging brown and Black folks. And look at your friend circle. What's in your friend circle? I mean, examine your own situation. And in all due respect, everybody has a right to befriend whoever they're comfortable with. And that's usually what we go with when we are establishing our friendships or our business relationships. But let us consider being balanced and open. If you've been closed, if you don't have any Black friends, maybe now's the time to start talking to some Black folks and see who you can get along with and who you connect with and who you are vibing with. But don't just do it because George Floyd died, right, and Breonna Taylor was murdered, and the list is long. Do it because you are genuinely interested in another human being that just happens to be Black. But what's happening now are these uncomfortable conversations in America that we are having to have, like I had with the chair of my board at Temple University. And like I said, a pretty conscious guy, and now even more aware, as most of us are, of being in an environment where there's a lack of diversity. I know for a fact from my conversations with Amanda and Nathan and Justin that that is an agenda for Solid to make it more diverse. Because when I first looked at Solid, I was like, oh, it's a bunch of white folks. All right. But with leadership that is cognizant of the lack of diversity, and that is something that is being worked on. So I salute you and your executive team and board. I salute your members, because again, it is painful to have to examine yourself and say, well, damn, I might be a bit of a racist here, or I might be a little lacking diversity in my social circles, or I may have allowed somebody to use the N-word and didn't check them. We must check ourselves and we have to check others. And there's a way to do it with respect and dignity. So it's not just, oh, you're a racist. No, right. Let's have a conversation about it, and right, let's be better and do better.
Right. And I think this, first of all, this is kind of what we talked about last week, where we were talking about these types of conversations need to be had. We need to have this dialogue that is more raw and real. We need to hear the stories. And I think one thing that we talked about was making sure that we create a platform for these stories to be told, and create an environment. And that's something that is part of this whole diversity inclusion of what Solid wants to do, is build an organization where we can continue to have these, this is just the tip of the iceberg of what we want to do, is so that we can continue to have conversations like this, so we can hear more stories and better educate ourselves from the standpoint of hearing from all different walks of life. And so that we can really understand. And, I know we were talking about recently other resources just here in Nashville. Justin has served on specifically, sorry, Justin, I'm going to give you a shout out on panels you have served on in regards, and I know there's been some other Solid members, I should say, as well, that are on right now that I've seen serve on panels. And I encourage everybody on here to seek those out, because it's giving people an opportunity to really tell their story, and for us to better, and I'm saying us as me, a white Caucasian male, I am like
You're white?
Right. I am like the example of every privilege you can have. So I'm calling my own self out on that, but I want to continue to be an ally and work on helping, give those platforms. And that's something I think, I know that the board has talked about, and we hope that our membership here joins us in this road to continue these types of conversations and action, and then turning into action items.
And again, with respect and consideration, this is not like point the finger kind of thing. And in some cases, it is point the finger. If you experience somebody who is being blatantly racist, you got to call them out. You got to, and you have to use your judgment. I don't want folks getting into physical fights and getting hurt or anything like that. We have to learn how to have civil discourse. I mean, the values. I live in Philadelphia. I live in the first capital of the United States. I live where Thomas Jefferson and the conveners of our Constitution, they wrote a beautiful document. It is so idealistic optimistic. It is such a beautiful, philosophically ideal concept. However, when Thomas Jefferson wrote that, Sally Hemings had maybe 6 kids with him, 7. And he owned, I hate that, he had enslaved people on his plantation at Monticello. When he wrote, all men are equal, they didn't mean Black folks or brown people or Asian. They didn't mean that. He meant all white people and all white men.
All white men, I was about
all
to say.
white men. Women were not. That's why I said,
no other people at the table. So
that's why I said we've got to, it's so many things that we have to tackle, all the isms, sexism, but, you know, but women stood up. You know, we had the suffragette movement, women fought for their right, and women finally got their right. But even still, women, we are, so if you are a woman of color, you're getting it double. You're getting it, you know, you're getting it on a lot of, you're getting a lot of, and if you are a good and grown woman of color, in our industry, a youth-oriented industry. So like I said, we need to eradicate the isms. We need to, that beautiful document, we need to make that come to fruition, because it is a beautiful, noble document written about people, but it should include all people.
All parties.
So, yeah. And now we're at the crossroads where we see an uprising and hate crimes. I'm not sure if you were aware, but you know, several Black men have been found hanging, and it has been described as suicides. Even what happened with NASCAR, with Bubba, that was a noose. I don't, where I come from, that wasn't no garage door opener. That was a noose. And for the FBI to lie and say otherwise, I mean, there's compromise going on in our Attorney General's office, our Department of Justice. Ain't no peace, no justice. There's not, and it's going to get worse. So we, all of us together, we've got to affect the change, because it's not going to happen just with Black folks. White folks, and I think why this is a little different now, just like in the Vietnam War era, you got white folks, you got all kind of folks with Black folks all together saying, yes, Black lives do matter. So there is, there's a movement amongst, especially young people. And that's why I say, I love what you're doing with Solid, because you give me hope. You give me hope for a better now and a better future. And I'm entrusting you all to make the changes that are necessary, because when I'm dead, I want you to remember and think about me and say, yeah, Dyana charged us and asked us and pleaded with us to make it better for not just my grandson, Luke, but for your children and your children's children, and for generations of human beings to come. We must.
Oh, that's so good. So good. All right. Well, I want to give time if people have questions as well.
I would love that.
Justin, do you want to?
Yes. Thank you, Dyana. I'm just sitting over here on mute, but just in my zone. Thank you so much, Dyana, for all of this right now. So the first question I have here from Amy, she's asking, what is your response when someone says to you racism is still occurring due to generational gaps?
Generation gaps?
Yeah, generational gaps.
Well, I've heard, and I'm not sure, Amy, that I completely, totally understand your question, because I've heard some people say, oh no, that happened 400 years ago, where I've heard white people say, oh, I don't own slaves, and I'm not racist, and I've heard those kind of things. I think that racism is generational. It is learned. And I do believe that, I mean, think about your own families and what has been said at the dinner table, or when you sat around the TV, or, you know, I do believe that racism is taught, because if you look at a little, like even now, I see my grandson, he has all kind of friends Latino, Asian, white. He plays with everybody, and he doesn't know. He's starting to become aware of color. And I mean, he sees television and he sees what's going on, but children are not, children love each other. They're not mindful of color up to a certain point. And then, I mean, there was a great experiment of the doll showing what Black children, do you want the white doll or do you want the Black doll? And more often than not, the Black children chose the white doll. But what are they seeing all the time? They're seeing the white ideal and standard of beauty on television, movies, and video games, cartoons, everywhere. They're not seeing anybody that looks like them. So it was no surprise to me when I saw that video experiment that the Black children, more often than not, chose the white doll. So Amy, I'm all over the place, girl. Listen, I hope I answered your question and thank you for it.
Love it, love it. I have another question from Victoria, who's from our e-board. I'd love to know more about Dyana's experience with the intersection of racism and Judaism.
Well, as I mentioned, thank you for your question. My stepfather was Jewish and my mother was married to him for 32 years. His name was Bernard Newman. And my stepfather was a psychoanalyst. So we spent many an evening at the dinner table having discussions. He was a big New York Times, he was a New York guy who read the New York Times and, you know, also considered himself a liberal and supported Bayard Rustin and Dr. King and, you know, C.T. Vivian. And so I think that both groups have experienced terrible atrocities. I mean, terrible atrocities. We cannot forget what happened with Hitler and Germany and the Nazis. That was despicable. Millions of people died because of bias and racism and hatred. And I hear the number 6 million a lot, but they can't even quantify the number of Africans that were kidnapped. And in some cases, there were some tribes that sold, so that happened. I want to go on the record and tell you, I've been to Africa many times. I know that. But the majority of African people that were kidnapped and spread throughout the diaspora, they can't say 6 million. It's much more than that. And for instance, more Africans were taken to Brazil. When I went to Brazil for the first time, I went to Bahia, which is a very Black part of Rio, but they also have racism problems there. I remember as a small child living in Puerto Rico. I might've been 9, 10, and I said to my grandmother, how come I don't see anybody that looks like me on TV? In Spanish. ¿Por qué yo no veo a alguien que se parece como mí? And my grandmother, who was very light complected and married to a very brown skinned Puerto Rican man, was like, don't worry yourself about that. Like, you're too young to be concerned about things like that. But even still, if you look at Telemundo and a lot of the Latin TV channels, you do not see people who look like Celia Cruz. She was an exception, not the rule. And there are a ton of Black folks who are Latino as well. So long answer to your short question. I think that Black folks and Jewish people have many things in common in terms of oppression, brutality, abuse, disrespect, ill treatment. I mean, in Hollywood, a lot of Jewish people changed their names to assimilate and to get what they felt were greater opportunities. So yeah, Jewish people, Black people, we struggle.
We have about 4 questions here. Can we get to maybe like about 2 more? At least.
I promise I'll be short, Justin.
No, you're good. You're good. Please. Okay. I have a question from Timon. What were some of the challenges you and the other founders faced while working to have June commemorated as Black Music Month?
Is this Timon, not Timon?
That's your Timon.
Hi, Timon. Some of the challenges that, okay, the co-founders of June Black Music Month are Kenny Gamble, who is my ex. We have 3 adult children. He's one of the architects of the Sound of Philadelphia. Very proud of him. He's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and a multiple Grammy Award-winning songwriter, producer, and the owner of Philadelphia International Records with Leon A. Huff. Also, Ed Wright, who was a broadcaster, and he was the president of an organization of radio personalities. We are the 3 co-founders of June Black Music Month. And some of the challenges that we faced was getting people's attention and regard and comprehension about why we felt the need to have a month, June, to celebrate the achievements, legacy achievements of people past, this generation, and paving the way for people coming up. And as I said earlier, Nathan, when we were talking, Black music is a multi-billions dollar business. And unfortunately, many Black artists, and I'm focused on Black artists, I know this has happened to white artists as well. However, many Black artists like Little Richard, who spoke very openly about signing a bad contract without the benefit of legal representation. And he fought the rest of his life to get his royalties and respect as one of the architects of rock and roll. So even look at this, rock and roll has been co-opted from Black folks. Black folks, Chuck Berry, Fats Domino, Little Richard, Sister Rosetta Thorpe. Please, ladies and gentlemen, do not forget these names. These are the mothers and fathers of rock. Rock, not Jerry Lee Lewis, not Elvis Presley, not Eric Clapton. They obviously listened to Black music, and they even in their interviews, we have a ton of interviews to be able to read or look at, they cited oftentimes Black artists and songwriters as their wellspring, their source of inspiration. So we did face some challenges, getting support, financial support from record companies that have made money off of Black folks. So in the beginning, when Gamble went to different record labels, asking them to support the then Black Music Association, you know, there was a little like, what? Like, we're afraid of organized Black people. We got a lot of that, but we persevered, and we were able to get President Jimmy Carter was the first American president to host an event on the lawn at the White House, and where he declared June as Black Music Month. At that first White House event, the Country Music Association had been to the White House many times, but they never had had an event with Black folks like they did June 7th, 1979. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the 20th century, not too long ago. We just celebrated the 41st anniversary of June Black Music Month. So we faced a lot of challenges. There was a lot of resistance. Well, why do you need a Black Music Month? Well, why not? You got a Country Music Month. There's a Latin Music Month. Why shouldn't there be a concentrated period of time where we say, thank you, we appreciate, we respect, we love Black music? So yes, we did face challenges, but you know what? Kenny Gamble is a boss. He is a leader. He was born out his mama's womb, a leader, and so was I. So honey, aggressive, assertive, whatever you want to call it. Somebody told me recently that I was pushy, and at first I led with my ego and I got offended. But then when I thought about it, I was like, you're right, I am pushy. I get shit done. I get it done. So I am a thinker, a conceiver, believer, and a high-level achiever. And I am fueled by Almighty God, by my faith in my family, my good judgment that my parents taught me, and my desire to do good and be good. So yes, thank you for that, T. Good to hear from you.
Awesome, awesome. Another question from Ashley. She says, hi, Deanna. How can we encourage our employers to hire people of color while discouraging tokenism?
Ah, okay, good question. Well, I don't see it as tokenism. I see it as evening out the playing field. Again, if you are in a company where there's nobody, like I spoke to a management company last month, and the entire company, I think they had maybe 35, 40 people. They said to me at the outset, they said, we are sorry to say that we have no people of color. And I was like, well, y'all need to fix that and fix it sooner than later, because you should feel some kind of way even saying that out your mouth. Fix it. And they said, so what you need to do, and even when Nathan, we were discussing how to go to your bosses or what to do. If you do not feel comfortable yourself going for fear of retribution or losing your job, there are laws against that, by the way. Although some laws don't, it's just like Black folks have the right to learn or to go vote. But look what happens when you go vote. You got to stand on a 10-hour line and whatever. That's why I am encouraging voting by ballot. Get your requested, so you don't have to do that. Vote early, get it out the way, exercise your right, and keep it moving. But write an anonymous letter, slide it under your bosses, type it out, do whatever. Slide it under the door and say, if I was more courageous and fearless, I would say this to your face, but I'm saying it to you anyhow, because I know the real deal of retribution, or, you may be coming out, firing me or giving me a demotion or something of that nature, or to your HR person. Like one of the conversations, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Brianna and Jamila Thomas. They are two young women who called for the blackout in the music industry. And it was motivated by them seeing George Floyd murder and Breonna Taylor and all of the rash of back-to-back killings of innocent Black people. I need to remind y'all, Breonna Taylor was in her house, minding her business with her man, when they came, badgered, knocked down the door. Her man had a gun, shot at them. They shot it. He's still alive. She was shot 8 times. And just recently it came out that she was still alive. She didn't die immediately from those 8. She was still alive. Shame. And they need to arrest those officers. And mind you, let me tell you, I have friends who are police officers, and I appreciate my good police officers keeping order in my community. It's the ones of any color, white, Black, as we saw in the George Floyd, because there were multiple races involved in that murder. I'm opposed to anybody being physically abusive and killing. So Breonna Taylor was innocent, minding her business in her own house. Same thing with the brother. I want to say he was in Chicago in his house. The police woman said she thought she was in her apartment and she shot and killed him. He was sitting in his living room watching television. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't hear a lot of those stories as it relates to white people, but we hear them almost daily. And because we all have cell phones and cameras, we're seeing more of it than ever before. But it's been going on, for a long time. It just didn't start in our lifetime. Like I said, 1619 is where they register initially the first Africans being brought to these shores. But I venture to say, I'm gonna go a step further, because there's a book called Before Columbus. They came before Columbus, and they, meaning African people, had ships. Y'all go study Egypt. They still can't tell you how they built those pyramids thousands of years ago. But ladies and gentlemen, those were not Arab people. Those were Black folks that built those pyramids, that made these incredible, the library at Alexandria was renowned in the ancient world for being that repository of knowledge and information. So there you go.
I love it.
Nice. So great.
I have another question from Zach Green. Great question. What are your thoughts on removing the term urban as a music genre?
Hey, Zach. Hi, Zach. It's interesting because I did a panel during June, Black Music Month, with Warner Brothers, where we had this very discussion about urban. And of course, as many of us know on this Zoom call, hey, Zach Green, waving. Republic was the first company in the UMG system to go out and say they were no longer using the term urban. And a lot of folks were, but what exactly does it mean? I personally, I get where it comes from. From my experience, the term urban started with a radio personality who used to be my boss. I call him the Dean of Black Radio, a great American broadcaster, Frankie Crocker. Frankie Crocker was the program director of WBLS in New York, at that time owned by Inner City Broadcasting, a Black company owned by Percy Sutton. Percy Sutton used to be the Manhattan borough president, and he was also Malcolm X's lawyer. He was a well-respected leader in Manhattan, in New York, in the Black community, and he owned WBLS. But they couldn't get, when I say they, the account execs could not get advertisers to buy the station like they bought their white counterparts. And at this time, WBLS 107.5, which is where I started, well, in New York. I started in DC, my broadcast career, but Frankie Crocker came up with the term urban contemporary in an effort to try to lure Madison Avenue advertisers. And mind you, he did this when WBLS was #1 in New York, and they still couldn't get advertisers to buy advertisement on air on the #1 station. Why, Nathan? Why, Justin? Why, Zach? Because of racism. How do you refute those numbers? And you say your agenda is to reach people to sell your products. That's what advertising is about. But they would not buy WBLS like they bought the lesser white-owned radio stations. Racism. So I don't have a problem with the term urban. It's just like I've had people say when President Obama came into the White House, he changed Black Music Month to African American Music Appreciation Month. I can't even say it right because I was like, well, I'm gonna tell you straight up, I'm one of the co-founders and it will be Black Music Month till I take my last breath and when I'm good and dead and gone. But I get it. I also use the term African American. I am originally from Africa and I am very American. So I use that term too, but I also identify with Black. So I say, you say tomato, I say tomato. Let's call the whole thing off. I am not offended by the use of urban, but I am offended by white record companies that their practices include bias and racism.
Awesome, understood. Couple more questions. And so I got one from Ritz McCain. As a fellow Afro-Latina, how do you balance not getting fatigued in having to explain or lead charges for diversity and inclusion, while also recognizing that these changes cannot exist without your voice?
Without what?
Without your voice.
Yeah. This is the other thing that's going on. I've spoken to my friends that work at various record companies, and oftentimes if they are the only Black or Latino person, their bosses have been coming to them saying, what do we do? How do we handle this? And that is unfair as well, to put the burden and responsibility on one person of color to be there. I am not the representative for all Latino Black people. I am a representative for me and anybody else who feels like I do. I'm sure even on today's call that many people are in disagreement with me or reject much of what I say. And what I will tell you is I respect your right to your opinion. I may not like it, but I respect your right to your opinion. You like the Confederate flag? Hey, I don't like it. You're not gonna see it in my crib or any of the events that I produce, but you like it, that's on you. It speaks volumes to what you believe, your values, but I still respect your right. I respect your right. So yes, I think it is unfortunate that if you are an Afro-Latina person at a company and you are being burdened with the shoulder of the responsibility to create diversity at your company, that's foul, that's wrong, and that's not right. But again, here's what we have to do. You gotta speak up. some shape, form, or fashion. You can go to your HR person and say, you know, just because I'm Black and Latina doesn't mean that I'm the voice or the representative for all my people. I am one person, and we are not monolithic. But I know I have friends who are Black Republicans, and they are supporters of the person who resides at 1600 Black Lives Matter Boulevard. Woo, I love that when that happened. Oh my God. The mayor of Washington posted it on her social media, and she said it can be seen from outer space. I was like, hallelujah, amen, yes. So if you find yourself in that situation, however you need to communicate to whomever to let them know that it is an uncomfortable position and it is not a righteous thing to put you in that position, speak up on it, girl, because if you don't speak up on it, then I remember my first job when I was 19 in radio at WHUR, the original Quiet Storm station, 96.3. My boss, his name was Bob Nighthawk Terry, and he came from a military background, and he treated me and everybody else on staff like we were in the Army. And he called me Williams. And one day, after a couple of months, this was my first radio job. I was so excited to be on the radio. We're talking 1973. After months of him barking at me, calling me Williams, I about had enough. And mind you, I was 19. This was my first job in radio, and I loved the job, but I about had enough of his verbal abuse. And I marched into his office and I told him, I said, Mr. Terry, I said, from this day forward, either call me Dyana or Miss Williams. I will no longer respond to Williams. I find it offensive. I was 19. And guess what? He started calling me Dyana after that. And he told me some years later that he did that because he wanted me to be tough. He said that day that I marched into his office and commanded him to call me the name my mama and daddy had given me, he said his respect for me increased tenfold. And he said he wanted me as a young woman in the radio entertainment business to be tough because he knew that I was going to encounter a lot of male bosses. And look, didn't we just see on the news today that women are speaking out once again at Fox News? Oh, honey, they done filed several lawsuits calling out people, all kind of, and this is not the first time this has happened at Fox News. It happens, it's all over. It's all, right. But if you do not speak up for yourself, if you do not articulate your discontent, that's why I said, I used the word earlier, you gotta be a little fearless. Okay, you gotta be a whole lot fearless when you speak up to a boss or somebody, you know, who is, has the power to give you a raise or demotion or whatever. You know, that's why I say go to HR if there is an HR in your company. But be fearless. Be fearless in your righteousness, in your indignation against unrighteousness. And shout out to my Afro-Latina sister. Puerto Rico!
Yes, come through. All right. One last question. So not sure if you know about the Lady Antebellum current controversy, Dyana, but if Lady Antebellum had to hire you as a consultant upon considering to change their name, what would your professional advice have been through this situation?
Who is it from?
Amanda.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you for your question. Great question, because this is, of course, in the news these days. First of all, I would have said, do a thorough check on the name that you want to change it to. And obviously they didn't do that. It was, I think, a knee-jerk kind of, we're going to change our name because antebellum in the South and the negative connotations of enslavement. But there was already a Lady A who had been performing for years. And how about they turn around and sued her? I'm not up on the latest on that, but I did see that they sued her. The latest. Now, had they been really smart, Nathan, Justin, they would have said, you know what? Come be a part of the group. Let's tour together. Let's work this out. Let's pay you for the use of your name. They're already rich and paid. They did not handle that properly. They were disrespectful, because all of us know that work in the music business, when you, like, I did an interview with Matthew Knowles, the father of Solange and Beyonce, the manager of Destiny's Child. And he said that their group, the group's name was Destiny, but the people who own Destiny, you know, sent them a cease and desist. And he said he had to change the name right away. He couldn't get in touch with his then wife, Tina Knowles, and he couldn't get in touch with the girls. So he said he just went ahead with Destiny's Child. He saw that it was clear that he could use the name. Shame on Lady Antebellum for not doing their due diligence, having their lawyer or their manager do a trademark search. It's very easy to do, very quick to see. But the way they are acting now, they really should be ashamed of themselves. They done made a debacle of their effort to be conscious. They done just, I got a potty mouth, so I'm doing my best not to cuss. But can I say that was very flucked up?
Yes, and I think, and a whole nother topic, but I think this goes to is you could go into a whole conversation of independent artists in general versus those that have support to that level, because, you know, I, not to get too far in the both sides of the lawsuit, but like to that point with the trademark, like, yes, actually Lady Antebellum did get Lady A trademarked, but they had, you know, obviously the resources to do that just a couple years ago, where the independent Lady A, who wouldn't have had the funds or resources to do that as an independent artist, which many times that's a struggle that independent artists just have in general, is they don't have always the resources to do that. So while you could say, okay, well, yes, Lady Antebellum did technically have some things in place, it goes to that bigger conversation, like, you know, you were saying, is looking at it from the perspective and really putting them, and of course I wasn't at the table, so I can't fully speak to, but, you know, putting yourself in that shoes of thinking this is an independent artist that, you know, has been putting out music for a long time. And yes, we might technically, in the eyes of the law, own this from a trademark perspective, but what are you actually gaining from, as you talk about tonight, I think it's looking at yourself and what is more important, you know.
But let me tell you, Nathan, years ago, many years ago, I produced a music conference for 16 years called the I Am. It was during June Black Music Month. And I created a Diamond Award. That was the award that we gave to Shaka Khan, Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis, Stevie Wonder, tons of people. And we have been doing it for a long time. I never trademarked that. It was a well-known award in the Black music community. Well, one day I get an email, I'm trying to remember if it was an email or a letter, it's been a while, from Hillary Rosen, who was then the head of the RIAA. She's a political pundit now, inquiring about the use, they wanted to license, the RIAA wanted to license the term Diamond Award from my nonprofit foundation. Okay, so we had calls, we had conversations, and then all of a sudden I get an invitation to go to the first Diamond. What they created, what they wanted to do was create a higher level beyond platinum to denote sales of 10 million or more in the music industry. That's what Diamond.
Right.
But Hillary knew that it was well known in the Black music industry that I had established this Diamond Award and that tons of famous people had it. Well, guess what? They were moving ahead without licensing the name from me. They just, and I had correspondence. Well, guess what? I had my lawyers send them, my very high-powered Afro-Latina lawyer and the law firm, my Black law firm, send them a very nice cease and desist about the event. It was in some big ballroom in New York. They called me and begged me. They were like, we promise, please just let us have this event. Everything's in place. And I said, y'all should have thought about that foul shit you did. Should have thought about that. I'm happy to say that we were able to work out a deal post that It was a six-figure settlement and an acknowledgement then, not so much now. That's why I'm letting you know that diamond level came from a Black woman, a Black nonprofit, and a big white organization that represents all the record companies try to strong arm us and take it away from us. I was like, try again. It ain't happening.
Oh, man.
I just wanted to share that story because.
Well, I think that's important. And I think that goes soon. And hopefully maybe at the end of this, they can find some sort of similar compromise, you know, and really continue to use an example. But I think that just shows, right? Like this has been going on, and it's not just particularly in this. There's obviously more examples out there in general, not just just in general of these examples. And I think that's why obviously this is going to blow up, because it's just another one on the list of the many, many years that this has been happening. So appreciate you.
Is Lady A, is she a sister?
Is she what?
Is she Black?
Yes.
And that's the other thing.
Yes,
she's a sister.
Yep, that was
Isn't that the irony of it? They're changing their name because of antebellum and association with slavery. And here they're suing an independent Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, honey. Okay.
Well, I know, Justin, that was the last question, right? And yes. I know we've taken a lot of your time. I just want to thank you so much. I know that you have for sure inspired, and if anything, are having our membership really dive even deeper than they probably already have in thinking about. I think, I'm sorry, I'm just going to even touch on the most important thing is looking at yourself, right? And then how that radiates back out, and really having to dig in and looking from your self perspective to then make change outward. And I just think that's something that I hope I hope that all our membership can take away, outside of the other many inspirational things that you spoke to us tonight. But, you know, it really helps to hear your story and to hear all the wisdom that you have gained over the years, because it's really going to help, I hope, empower many of our future leaders really make the change that's necessary, because it is, to what you said, is it's our responsibility to take the torch. You put in the time and the years, and you've set us up to take it now, and it is our responsibility to continue this fight and move the needle forward to one day, like you said, I love it, get rid of the isms. There should be no isms. No,
down with the isms. And you know, I'm seeing, hi, Brian O'Neill. I'm seeing people sending messages, and I'm like, hi, Jason. Jason say, hey, everybody. I am coming to Nashville. I love Nashville, Music City. I am asking Solid, and a shout out to Phil Thornton, who is the general manager of RCA Inspiration, my dear friend who sits on the board with me at the National Museum of African American Music. I'm asking you to consider taking a membership. We have all different levels of a membership. Support this effort, which, by the way, you should see my board. The board that we sit on for the museum, it is what I'm telling you board should look like. We got white men, we got white women, we got Black women, it's a mix of people. It is not one thing. And I'm talking about white people who support and love Black music. Just because it's created by Black folks doesn't mean that, obviously, if it's number one around the world, it's more than just Black folks that love this music. It is loved by most people that have a pulse. But I am asking you as a personal plea, please support the museum. You can go to blackmusicmuseum.org to learn more. It is so fly. It is going to be everything. And I will be in Nashville, our grand opening. We're thinking the beginning of November, but just keep following us, follow us on social media. And again, go to blackmusicmuseum.org. Support an institution that is for all of us, that happens to be about America's indigenous music. Nathan, to you, Justin, thank you. Amanda, Luke, you know, I met some of the executive committee, all wonderful people. I love what I've heard. I'm very impressed with Solid, and I look forward to seeing you in person, and prayerfully look forward to hugging you In the interim, I'm giving you all virtual love from the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. Go solid, solid as a rock.
Oh,
and bravo to all of you. Bravo.
and thank you so much again.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you all for tuning in and staying on. I see the numbers stayed on all the way through, and we really appreciate it.
Hi, Maggie. Hey, Luke. I'm just like getting in. Hey, Rachel. Yes, everybody's chiming in. Yes, yes, yes.
I have seen a lot of positive comments. So again, thank you so much. And I'm just gonna say selfishly, I know Henry and how long he's been working. Formerly when I was at the Recording Academy, they would be in the boardroom for, years. They've been working on this in the shadows, I feel like I say, of Nashville. And that whole crew has been working so hard to get the museum to where it is today. So it is super excited. So
Henry Hicks is the CEO of the museum. Hey, Brianna. Y'all stay healthy, wear your mask, social distance, more than 6 feet. Just stay healthy and be fulfilled in whatever you do in life. Be fulfilled. Okay?
Yes.
And love each other.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, Nathan.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Justin. Bye, Luke.
Bye, everybody. Okay.
Okay, peace.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're so very welcome. Peace.